Good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar, exploring the funding and club support opportunities that are available through COVID-19 restrictions. This evening I'm joined by a number of colleagues. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Dave Stubley and I'm the National Club Development Manager. Also speaking this evening will be Ted Mitchell, the National Facilities Development Manager, and Don Parsons, the RFU's Club Business Manager. And we are ably supported by Alex Thompson, the Volunteer Manager Learning and Development, who will be managing the webinar in the background and popping up occasionally to ask questions via a number of polls. I'm just going to wait for people to join and we'll go around a few things. So you should be able to hear me. And if you can't hear me, please check your own connection. And if you've got any other issues, please ask in the chat if you need help, and I'll explain the chat function in a moment. Please, in terms of looking through this, please can you find the chat function? And so that we can all speak to each other and see everything that's being said, please can you set this to all panelists and attendees so that we can see all the conversations. It normally has a default setting which just goes to panelists, so that will be just the people talking this evening. So can you please go and set this to all panelists and attendees so that we can, everybody on this webinar can share and see all the conversations. Please find a view that suits you. This is we've moved to Zoom for the first time, and the layout and the functionality is slightly different from the webcast that we used to use. If viewing full screen, the chat box, you can open the chat box, but you can move it around so that it suits you and so that you can keep an eye on both the presentation, you can hear me and others, and also see what's coming out in the chat. So just take some time to work to make it work for yourselves. Now, obviously, you can view this webinar on a number of different devices. However, the views will be slightly different. Clearly, if you're in front of a laptop or using something like that, you'll get the view as you can see there. It does work on your phone. However, if you're using sort of a tablet or anything, you will need to think about opening and closing the polls as they come up, because they'll get hidden behind the scenes if necessary. So you can use all these, but just be mindful that it works slightly differently. Again, just as we go through this again, just as we welcome more people who are joining, this evening's webinar is to explore the funding and club support opportunities through COVID-19 restrictions and just see what was out there at the moment. I'm joined this evening by Ted Mitchell, the National Facilities Development Manager, Don Parsons, the Club Business Manager, and Alex Thompson, who's managing this in the background, who's the Volunteer Manager, Learning and Development, and myself, Dave Stubley, the National Club Development Manager. Again, you should be able to hear me. If you can't hear me, please check your connection. Sometimes you need to go in and out, and if you have a technical problem, please ask in the chat function. Please try and find the chat function. Have a look in terms of the layout of your screen, and please set this to all panelists and attendees. I think the default button is to all panelists, and therefore that only means that the people talking this evening on the webinar will see what's in the chat. So if you set it to all panelists and attendees, everybody on the webinar can see all the conversations as they take place. Again, find a view that suits you. We're moving to Zoom for the first time rather than webcast, and therefore the functionality and layout is slightly different. But if you are viewing in full screen and you open the chat function, as mentioned earlier, you can move it around to suit you so that you can see the screen, see the presentation, and also keep an eye on what's coming in and out of the chat as well. So again, just to recap, there are different views in respect of different devices. It works on all, but obviously you just need to be mindful of how things work on the different things. Works on your phone, obviously works on your laptop, works on your computer, but pop-up polls will come up on a tablet and you will need to close them so that you can continue to see various things. So just see how it works on your various device. So again, we're just about to get underway with the main concept, but we're going to explore the funding and club support opportunities through COVID-19 restrictions, and that's what we're going to go through this evening. So just before we get underway, a little bit of housekeeping. If you experience any technical problems, pop them in the chat function. We'll see whether we can help. If it, obviously we always have to rely on the broadband width, etc. So things can happen. That's the nature of the business at the moment, but please use the chat function. Questions, please. This is about how we all learn. Put those into the chat function. We may have people on the call who may have the answers to those questions, and obviously we'll all pile in and help as we can. However, please bear in mind that this evening we're going to cover funding from Sport England, from the government, and some stuff on VAT very quickly, as well as some RFU. So we may not be able to answer all the questions this evening. We will take them away, but you may need to go off into various directions and answer those through the government website and or local authority, but we will do our best. We will be recording this so that you can play it back in your leisure, and also for anyone that has signed up but hasn't been able to make this evening. We are aiming to finish at 8 o'clock or before, depending on how speedy we get through, but that's the time we are aiming to finish as advertised. So let's get underway. What will we aim to cover this evening? We're aiming to cover support in 4 main areas. Aiming to take you through a reasonable headline view of the current Sport England's funding. Ted will then talk to you about opportunities available via the RFU England Rugby. Don is going to give you a little bit of a heads up on some of the new things that have come across the wires in terms of government support. And I'll come back at the end to make a very quick and simple VAT offer, which may be pertinent to many clubs that are on this call. So over to Alex for the first poll.
Okay, I've just launched a poll for you. It'd be good to know who's actually joined us this evening. We've got over 200 clubs that are there. So tell us about your club, and it's multiple choice. You can own your facilities. You can add in there the pay some staff, or you're part of a multi-sports club. Let's have a look about what we've got there. I can see people completing it. We've got, as I say, over 200 joining us this evening, which is great. And we're over half of the amount of people who have completed in some sense there. So I'm going to leave that up for just a moment. I'm just going to remind people with that chat function to set it to all panelists and attendees. So you can make sure that we're having the conversation with everybody. So I'm just going to close and end that poll now, and it's quite interesting what we've got on there. So I'm sharing those results. So we've got a hell of a lot, sort of 63% that own their facilities, 33% that rent them. We've got a few that are part of a multi-sports club, and some pay some staff. That's there, 61%, quite a lot there. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you are on a tablet, please do close it, because it will go behind your screen. So I'm stopping sharing that now.
Okay, Alex, thank you for that, and that's really interesting. And hopefully there'll be something for most people on the webinar this evening. So getting underway. So the first part of the session is to give you quite a high level view of the Sport England return to play funds. So before I just start to get underway, just to put that into context. So obviously Sport England, some of you may have been successful in getting the emergency grants that were advertised earlier this year. And just to put it into context, rugby clubs up and down the country benefited from just over £1.5 million worth of grant from Sport England, and hence that's just bringing you up to speed now in terms of what's out there. So Sport England Return to Play Fund recently launched. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of this, but they've recently launched this. They've added an additional 16.5 million, which is aimed to support sports clubs, rugby clubs, and those supporting the community sports sector. And this is during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's really about trying to get, once we get through this national lockdown, supporting rugby clubs who've been impacted by restrictions brought in to tackle the disease. And what they've done, of that 16.5 million fund, it's split into 3 strands, which we will go through now. So the first one, and £10 million worth of funding, is the return to play small grants. This will provide grants between £300 and £10,000, which was exactly the same as the first time round. And it will help, and aims to help rugby clubs respond to immediate challenges of returning to play. And that's the key thing, returning to play in a COVID-19 safe environment. They are telling us that it'll be as flexible as possible and in terms of its priorities, so it can be able to best respond to the changing challenges that we have. Obviously, this was launched prior to the recent national lockdown, so even in that time, it's changed slightly to try and react to the situation we find ourselves in. And so, this would be helping clubs and looking at finances there in terms of having to deliver in, say, the smaller groups, maybe the hygiene and the health and safety aspect, any other safe equipment, and also, and clearly not to be forgotten, helping to provide training to club volunteers within that time. The second part of the Sport England Return to Play Fund is very much a facility-led aspect, and it's 5 million linked into their community asset fund. And this is very much about physical environments, and this will provide grants from £10,001 to £50,000, hence why it's moving up a scale. And it could help rugby clubs adapt and open important places and spaces that can help them welcome back their local community safely. Now, that, again, they're being flexible. There isn't as much sort of itemized aspect on this in terms of, if and when we can get back into changing spaces, we might need to think about how we do that. It may be looking at some of the social facilities. What can you do to make it better, and also adapt in this environment? How can you adapt to the challenges? But in terms of using space that you have, maybe improving ventilation within becoming the key issues around the pandemic. Again, about converting some existing space to meet social distancing requirements, such as additional changing space. Again, thinking outside the box and how you do that, and again making improvements to the physical environment, so that and it may be just for temporary use, so you can get more people active in different ways. So it's just thinking outside the box and reacting to the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. The third one, which I will do a little bit more in-depth dive on in a little while, is that they in the first round they had a Active Together crowdfunding application, and they've put additional funding into this of an additional 1.5 million, and again is there for our clubs to set up their own campaigns to help sustain them through the crisis. They are directing many clubs to this, because I'll go through some of the priority groups that they're looking to tackle for the funds in the first 2 tranches. But basically, the crowdfunding allows match funding up to £10,000, and there is a wealth of guidance and training and resources that you can use to help get successful campaigns. But we'll look at some of that in a bit more detail in a moment. So just to give you some overviews in terms of the Return to Play Fund, we talked about that. It's really about creating COVID secure settings to help rugby resume when it can. I appreciate that we're in a national lockdown at the moment, but this is looking within 6 weeks or within the January timescale. What I will impress upon you, if you go onto the website, I have created a fund chooser tool. So it gives you the option to go through a number of questions and answer those in terms of what you are trying to do. And then we'll direct you to the most eligible funding route. In order to save your time, in terms of if you are thinking of that, I would recommend 100% that you take that fund chooser tool to help direct you. They're very simple questions, but it just points you in the right direction and ultimately saves your time, but also their time to say, no, that's not the right route. Now, just need to pick up on this, which is why I made the comments on the third fund around crowdfunding. They are especially seeking to support clubs working with specific audiences. Basically, through research by Sport England, have been identified to be experiencing the most difficulties at this time. So their highest priority of where this certainly the small grants and the CAF funding is going is aimed at areas of high deprivation. The first three indices of deprivation there, deciles that is. And there are other funding up priorities which are key from Sport England in terms of organisations working with Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, people on lower incomes, disabled people, people with long-term health conditions. And also just the one at the bottom, which is obviously also useful. So you can see some key diversity inclusion aspects there, but also where they're looking to focus their money. But also pick up on that final bullet on that slide, which is they're also looking at organisations that don't have a significant level of reserve funding available to utilise, and therefore are in danger of going under if things don't improve quickly. As I say, I'm just going to take you through a little bit more detail on the crowdfunding, which has been particularly successful for a number of our rugby clubs, because this is the more open one, and it's worthwhile just exploring. So they've added a further £1.5 million into this match funding pot, and obviously rugby clubs, but sports clubs in general, can apply up to £10,000 worth of match funding. And just to give you a flavour, to date, since they launched it a number of months ago now, we have seen 44 rugby clubs being funded by Sport England through this route. In total, the clubs have raised £689,000, which on average is 16k per club. And for every pound that Sport England have put in, there's been £2.08, which has been raised from the crowd, the local community. So whilst that isn't huge numbers of clubs, certainly rugby clubs are top the leaderboard in terms of numbers raised and also numbers that have been funded. So that is a positive. And here is an example off the crowdfunder site of a rugby club. You can see there on your screen, Dunstabilians RUFC, raised over £29,585 from 222 supporters in 36 days. So you can see a club, and it's actually nice to see someone actually playing rugby in the community there. So again, just gives you a flavour of what this is all about. And just for those that may not have come across it or understand exactly how the crowdfunding support works with Sport England, this is where people, the community, local businesses pledge money in return for rewards. So the crowdfunder and the crowdfunding linked to Active Together is very much based on a reward basis. So, you put a product or a benefit or a service up, and people bid for that. It really helps. In many cases, drives the community aspect of it. The platform that they use in conjunction with Crowdfunder provides the infrastructure to do this and to do it simply and well. And obviously, they also provide support and support resources to help you do that. It means that you're really effectively incentivizing members in the community to support local clubs by giving now, redeeming later, or receiving rewards offered by the organisation. And those 44 clubs, which you can go onto the Crowdfunder site and have a look at, have done that very successfully, and have gained more benefits just than raising funding, in the sense of becoming much more community focused. That slide's fairly self-explanatory, but who's it aimed at? It's aimed at rugby clubs, sports clubs who have had problems, financial issues in terms of the pandemic, and are looking to try and deal with the short-term financial difficulties. And it includes all sorts of different clubs, from the charities, voluntary, social enterprise sector, who are delivering sport. Again, in terms of the support that is there, they're scrapping fees, all the fees for the Active Together programme, and covering any transactional charges to ensure that every penny that is raised by the club and then potentially matched by Sport England to the level goes to them. We've sort of advertised a number of these, but certainly the feedback I've had from those that I've spoken to is that their monthly webinars of advice and support, and also getting feedback from successful crowdfunded projects has been really, really well received, and gives a lot of different ideas to different clubs up and down the country. And so, there's a lot of resource going into it to support it. As I say, crowdfunding is more than just about giving, a pound here or £10 there. It's about it also, in terms, and certainly with the crowdfunder approach, which is the Active Together, it helps clubs diversify some of their funding streams. It helps work if you look up and look into the community. The local community will provide you with some benefits that you can then sell, and actually the feedback that we've had, not just in terms of the figures, in terms of pounds, but also in terms of the community engagement and the links between members and the local community, has also been really positive from the feedback we've had from a number of clubs. If you're interested in this, you can sign up on the crowdfunder website, and then you can start to set your target and put in place incentives and rewards, and start that process. Now, clearly, from a Sport England point of view, they need to approve it before they will confirm match funding, and what that, and you'll see all that on the website. They can, and that once they've approved it, they could fund up to a maximum of 10,000. They don't do that every time. It would depend on what your pledge is and where it is in terms of their decision-making process. So it's up to £10,000. But what they do say, if they do agree and you do hit the target, they do work very quickly to get the money into your bank account as soon as possible. And if they approve it and you receive the pledge, you need to do two things. You need to at least raise 25% of your initial target before they start to dribble things in. And you need to raise this from a minimum number of supporters. So it's not just about one person going this, and it will depend on the size of your initial target. And I think that's the first part over. I'm going to ask Alex to run another poll now.
So I've launched another poll, which will take us into the next bit that Ted Mitchell will lead. But who has applied to their constituent body for emergency funding support? Applied, and have you received that funding? I can see quite a few have, as we sort of put that vote in. Have you applied and successfully, or did not know about it? Let us know, and that will help us move on to the next one. But people are filling out that one. Quite a few clubs, it looks like, have managed to apply for it. That one's sort of flying up now. There's still quite a few more people to put their answer on it. Some didn't know about it, it looks like. But yes, we got over 200 clubs, so it's going to take a bit longer, this poll, than some other evenings. But I can clearly see the answers are sort of coming in now. So last chance to put your answer in, and then we will close this poll in just a few seconds. So I'm going to close it now. So I'm ending the poll results. So good news, sort of, 33% was the highest who have applied and received funding. But there's still quite a few people who don't know about it, Ted. So they, know about it, but they haven't applied. That's the next biggest one. But there's still, 17% that didn't know about it. So Ted, can you take us through the next bit around this, please?
Yes, thank you, Alex. So, yeah, that was really interesting, actually. And it's great that the majority of people either have applied and been successful or are aware of it. But it is worth just running through this one slide just to make sure those that were not aware of it understand the basics. And this is what we call the Constituent Body Immediate Support Fund, sometimes referred to as the ISF. And really, in conjunction with the RFU, CBs back in April ring-fenced some funding simply in order to support clubs affected by COVID. Your CB, which is the county body, constituent body of the RFU, may well still have some funding available if you are struggling financially as a result of COVID. So CBs across the country, as we've just seen evidenced, have been providing small grants to clubs that need help, but that opportunity is still there. So if you've looked at it before, it might be worth having a look again. If you weren't aware of it, have a look, have a conversation, make contact with your CB to see if they can help you, and also in terms of information that may be on their website. So just a quick flag prior to me talking about the RFU response loan to let you know if you weren't aware of the Constituent Body Immediate Support Fund. So I'm just going to talk through a few slides around the RFU COVID response loan, where we have interest-free loans available to clubs of between £2,000 and £10,000. So very simply, what is this fund here to do? We've obviously heard from Dave in terms of lots of the Sport England funding, and we're going to hear from Don in terms of lots of the government support. And really, this immediate response loan from the RFU is there simply to help clubs that are experiencing short-term cash flow issues as a result of the impact of COVID-19. Okay, so we're very much here looking at unavoidable, essential, typically operating costs. So for example, rent, utility costs, subscriptions that simply in the short term, the club is not in a position to make financially. But as well as that, this immediate response loan can also be used to help the club with essential costs to achieving COVID security on their facilities. So again, in order for you to operate, we see the ability to amend your facilities as an essential cost. So again, that would be something that is eligible and could be funded through this response loan. The key thing here is that this is really about the next 3 months. Okay, so as I said, there's lots of other funds out there that might enable you to look a little bit further ahead. But what this is about is for clubs that are experiencing short-term cash flow issues that are in a position where over the next 3 months, they're not going to be able to make their essential payments. So it wouldn't be something to look at too far ahead. So if you think you're going to be in a difficult position in 4, 5, 6 months, then this would not quite be the right thing for you at the moment. There'd be other things to look at. But then in a month or 2 months' time, if things haven't improved, that will be the time to then come in to this loan to help you out with that short-term cash flow. And then simply, that's what this fund is here to do. This is what is not eligible and items that this fund would not fund. So firstly, we wouldn't want to duplicate funding that is available through government. So for example, we'd expect clubs to take advantage of the furlough scheme. We would obviously expect clubs to take advantage of the rate relief and things like that. So we wouldn't want to cover those things when that funding is available from elsewhere. This isn't about doing additional. This isn't about new activities or events. This is unavoidable essential costs. So effectively anything that really the club doesn't need to spend wouldn't be eligible for this immediate response loan. And obviously, just to stress that point, this is about the next 3 months. So if these were costs that were going to be incurred in March, April, May, that the club looking forward felt they might be in a difficult position, then this application would only become relevant for that when we start to get into the new year, January and February, and turn things around. So in terms of the interest-free loans, between £2,000 and £10,000, very simply, they are repayable over 3 years. And Dave, if you could click the slide along, the first 6 months is automatically deferred. So there is an automatic 6-month payment holiday. In terms of the application process, it's really straightforward and it's designed to be exactly that. So previously you might have looked at this where we had windows where the application window opened and then would close. We're now in a position that this is just an open opportunity on a rolling basis for clubs to apply to when they reach a point that they need this kind of help. Okay, it's a very simple online application form. It was designed in that way, and the feedback from clubs that have gone through it has been great. And really, there's 3 simple elements to the application: the online application form, the submission of some very basic recent financial information, so really the kind of last 12 months accounts, and then the completion of a simple cash flow template, which again is modeled in a way to enable you to look at those next 3 months and track your cash flow through that period. Because this is about this immediate response, this is for clubs that are finding things difficult. It's obviously designed to have a quick turnaround. So this is not something that's going to take a significant number of weeks or months, certainly, to get a decision. This is something we're looking to turn around extremely quickly so that the clubs that need the money in the short term get it as soon as possible. Just briefly, there's a couple of screenshots on the application form just to stress its simplicity. So the first part just explains those two key pieces of information, which is a copy of the most recent annual accounts and the completed Excel pro forma. And again, just to stress, the cash flow template is very simple. It's designed to enable us to do a very quick and simple review by almost inserting it into a wizard that provides some financial ratios and information. So it does need to be that template that the club used to provide their cash flow. We're not able to accept applications where the clubs have created their own cash flow on a different spreadsheet because it doesn't enable us to assess it in the same way and consistently between clubs. So that's just something to flag. And then very simply, the application form asks you some basic information about the applicant and effectively then asks you what the loan will be used for. And there's a drop-down menu that outlines the typical things that have been funded previously, but also gives the opportunity to highlight something that is not specifically mentioned that you feel is an eligible item. And then it asks you what mitigation steps you've taken in order to reduce these costs. So again, we're just interested to gather intel of what clubs have been able to do to reduce their outgoings during the first lockdown or the lockdown that we're currently facing at the moment. And again, it's just a tick box at the end to make sure that you've remembered to attach those accounts and that Excel pro forma. So I'm now going to hand over to Alex, who's got a poll about the Emergency Immediate Response Loan Scheme.
So who plans on applying? You know, we've just heard from Ted. So who plans on applying to the RFU emergency loan? We did the same question back in lockdown 1 and it was pretty low. So it'd be interesting to see the results here. I can see they're coming in and then we've got a bit of a question for you after this that we'd like your sort of input into the chat. So if you can make sure you've got it on all panelists and attendees. So again, you know, it's most people seem to be sort of saying no or not currently. That seems to be coming through. Just going to give it a last chance for the final ones to complete it. And then we will close this poll in just a couple of seconds. Okay, so I'm ending those poll results and sharing them with you now. So you can clearly see there, you know, that, you know, the key one now, not currently, but may consider it in the future. So it's one that the people to know in the background. Clearly, a lot of people don't want to go down that route, but, you know, a small amount definitely do. So, you know, let's have a look now at a bit of a question that I want you to put into the chat on the next slide. So, in the chat function, set it to all panelists and attendees so we can all see the conversation. But we want to share, you know, the sort of things you've done to generate income because it's been different, hasn't it, through these times. So what has your club been doing to generate funds through the COVID-19 restrictions? Share in the chat. Please do include your club name because we'd love to know these. And now I am going to pass, well, actually, no, we're going to move on again. It's still me, I've realised. So move it on. So we're going to move on to HMRC and the government support there. And we're kicking it all off. So Don will take you through this, but we're going to kick it all off with another poll to lead you into one of the biggest grants that, you know, one of the newest grants that's there, and we'll give the details on. So I'm launching this poll now with you. Business support grant, or you might have heard it as a local restrictions grant. You know, do you know about it, but you're not sure if it's applicable? Have you applied to it? Are you receiving the grant? We know some clubs are receiving the grant. I know I've spoken to a couple that are sort of getting 1,800 in. Some have seen it and they're not applicable, or is other, just let us know a few more details. So please, complete this poll, and then what I would ask you is sort of go back into that chat function and do let us know how you've been generating those income through these times, which obviously is a very different season, and we've had to adapt accordingly in there. So I can see we've had sort of over half responses now, so just a chance for other people just to do it. I'm going to still keep it going for a moment. Have a look at that poll. If you can't see it, if you're on a tablet, it may have gone behind the screen to another one. So I'm going to give it a last sort of 5 seconds here, and then I will close this sort of poll. And I'm going to end the poll results now. And I'm just sharing those with you. So most people know about it, but not sure if it's applicable. So this next section, Don, it sounds like it's going to be very, very valuable to you. So I'm going to hand over to Don now, who's going to focus around this government support, starting with this business support grant. But as a little reminder, let us know in the chat about those generating income and what you've done. They'll be great. We'll collate them as we go away. Don?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks, Alex. Some interesting results there in the poll. 33% of clubs not sure. So hopefully in this section, some of those clubs are going to pick up some useful information. So the business grant scheme, this is the latest scheme from the government to support businesses who have been required to close in England due to local or national restrictions. And to be eligible for the following grant aid. So for properties with a rateable value of 15,000 or under, grants available of £1,334 per month, or 667 per 2 weeks. For properties with rateable value of between 15 and 51,000, their grants are £2,000 per month, or 1,000 per 2 weeks. And for properties with rateable value of 51,000 or over, these grants are £3,000 per month, or 1,500 for 2 weeks. So how do we access it? This is straightforward. Contact your local authority, speak to the local authority. Each have their own different system in place for administering the grant. So please do make contact direct. There are also a 5% discretionary pot available that has been issued to local authority from central government. And this grant is for clubs or businesses without the rateable value. So there is also a discretionary pot available to service those businesses. If you're not sure of your rateable value, there is a screenshot here of government website where you can find and check your business rate valuation. That's available on gov.uk. So business rate holiday, the remainder of this information has gone out before, but it's really useful, I think, to go over as a reminder. So what is this? This is for all retail, hospitality or leisure businesses, including rugby clubs, sports grounds, will not have to pay business rates in the 2020-21 tax year. Local authorities are in charge of implementing this holiday. So again, this is direct contact to them. So who's it available to? These for all rugby clubs or sports grounds who are rate payers. So this is the rate payer, the predominant rate payer, the organisation that this is available to. And those that are wholly or mainly used for the qualifying purpose, in this case, playing of rugby or sport. The job retention scheme has been extended. So they're obviously applicable to clubs who are paying staff. So the extended retention scheme is administered by HMRC. It's to help employers pay wages for workers who are unable to work due to coronavirus. So it's for employees designated by the employer as furloughed due to the virus, and HMRC will reimburse up to 80% of that salary, up to a cap of 2,500 per person per month. and the full grant amount received must go to the worker, but at the employer's discretion, they may wish to top the grant up to 100% of the employee's salary. So this extended scheme is more flexible, and it's up to the employer how long the furlough period continues for. Also important just to note with this scheme, the associated employer national insurance contributions plus the minimum pension contributions are covered by the employer. And this scheme has been extended to March 2021. Who's it available to? Well, all UK-based businesses, obviously including rugby clubs and constituent bodies. Employees have to have been on PAYE payroll by the 30th of October 2020 and either be full-time, part-time employees, agency contracts, or employees on flexible or 0 hours contracts are all eligible. If you need any help around that scheme or any items of employment law, then the RFU's legal helpline, which is provided by Owen Mitchell, and the details are on the screen, also available as part of the pack post this webinar. VAT deferral. So what is this? All VAT payments were automatically deferred by government from March 2020 until June 2020. You're given until the end of the 2021 tax year, so that's the 31st of April 2021, to pay any liabilities that may have been accumulated. And the VAT deferral scheme has been extended by the new payment scheme. Now, this gives clubs the option to spread the repayment of the VAT deferred, which was due in March to June 2020, over instalments in 21-22. How do you access this? So you must continue to submit all VAT returns on time to avoid penalties. VAT refunds and reclaims will be paid by the government as normal. And instead of paying the full amount by the end of March 2021, you can make smaller payments up to the end of March 2022 interest-free. You'll need to opt in to the scheme, which means that your VAT liabilities due between the 20th of March and the 30th of June 2020 do not need to be paid in full until the end of March 2022. And those that can pay their deferred VAT can still do so by the 31st of March if they wish. The RFU, Manor VAT helpline. This is run by Russell Moore, and his details are on the screen and available post-webinar. Excuse me. The bounce back loan is a government, another piece of government support. So what is this? This is introduced to help smaller businesses, including rugby clubs impacted by COVID-19, to borrow between £2,000 and up to 25% of the business turnover, capped at a maximum of £50,000. The repayment term is fixed at 6 years with an interest rate of 2.5% per annum. And before your first repayment is due, your lender will contact you about further options to extend the term of your loan to 10 years, move to interest-only payments for a period of 6 months, or pause your repayments for a period of 6 months if you have already made at least 6 repayments. What is it? It's the government will cover the first 12 months of interest payments and will provide lenders with 100% government-backed guarantee. And this is this loan scheme is open until the 31st of January 2021. Who is it available to? Well, most UK-based businesses, including incorporated rugby clubs, regardless of turnover, and established and carried out business before the 1st of March 2020. And businesses must meet the other British Business Bank eligibility criteria. And for more information on the scheme and how to apply can be found on the British Business Bank site. What are the British Business Bank eligibility criteria? The business or the rugby club must be UK based in carrying out business, trading or commercial activity, and the business or rugby club is a company or limited liability partnership incorporated or established in the UK. What are the British Business Bank eligibility criteria? So having a borrowing proposal which, were it not for coronavirus, would be considered viable by your bank or the lender and will enable the business to survive any short to medium term difficulty. So check if your bank is eligible to supply the loans. There's a link for you to check if you can, embedded within the presentation. And if they are, speak to them and they will talk you through the process and are the ones that administer the scheme. So we've got another poll for you. I'll just hand back to Alex.
Thank you, Don. So we're getting there, going to our final section. And this poll will tee up the last bit around VAT. So can you answer yes to anything? Answer each one of these. So it's multiple choice. You can answer, and I want you to answer each one of these. Is your club constituted as a not-for-profit entity? Is your club registered for VAT purposes? Can you answer yes to that? Do you have a bar facility? And does your club hold events to raise funds for your club? So yeah, I can see sort of we're getting halfway there now of people completed. It's great to see so many people come on this webinar this evening, sort of 200 plus to see. So last in a moment, can you answer yes to each one of these? And so we'll just finish up. If you are struggling with the poll, you can do what has been done there and put it into the chat function. I'm going to end the polling results now, and I'm going to share them. And, this will tee up nicely for handing over to Dave Stubley to talk around VAT. And so if you've answered yes to all of those questions, well, then the next bit's going to be very exciting for you around VAT. So I'm handing over to Dave.
Thank you, Alex. This is the final section of this evening, so please bear with me. So hang on, let me just, that's it. So we did run a VAT webinar back at the early part of COVID, which was run by our Russell Moore, our VAT consultant, and that's still available for downloading. And I would recommend you have a look at that in due course if you need to. But I'm just going to pick up on one thing this evening, and I'm no VAT expert, but this was on the back of some of the work that Russell's been doing. There's a specific VAT relief that's available to not-for-profit sports clubs, and rugby clubs being one of those. And most of our rugby clubs who are in the community game are not-for-profit. But this is a relief that hasn't been used widely across the country. So since over the summer with the lockdown and obviously people looking at finances and cash flow, Russell's worked with 50 plus clubs to successfully apply retrospective claims which have been settled for between £5,000 and £28,000, and the total is over 600k. And if you answered yes to those 4 questions, and I'll flash them up again in a moment, or even if you're not quite sure, I would encourage all clubs who may well be eligible to take opportunity of this windfall and to review their position. And that may well be picking the phone up to Russell and just asking the question. That will be all that it takes. So just to reiterate, the questions that we put on the screen were, can you answer yes to these questions? Are you a not-for-profit entity? And I would argue that most people on the call who are in the community field would be a yes, not in every case, but in most. Is your club registered for VAT purposes? That's a question that you'll need to understand. Do you have a bar facility? And does your club hold events to raise funds? Now, basically, Russell's saying if you say yes to all those 4, then there is a potential that you could be in for that kind of windfall. So let me just give you a couple of case studies. I took the case study of the large club out because I felt but we've got a number of case studies, and this just gives you, these are real life examples over the last few weeks. So you can see on the screen there that there is a medium to small size club. There's just some highlighted figures there. they got a retrospective claim over the last 4 years of 17.5k into their account. But the other benefit of it is that once this is set up and running, it obviously has an ongoing benefit in terms of the treatment of VAT. Again, it's all relative to the size of the club. And here's a slightly smaller club that benefited from this. Again, another success in the recent weeks. And just using this as an example of other things to think about that may help you raise some cash at this time. And simply, I'm not going to get into the vagaries of VAT. I'm certainly not qualified to do that, but certainly I do know a man that can. So please, he's been flashed up before, but Russell Moore is retained consultant for this. His details are on the screen in front of you. We will send this out, and Russell has a simple approach. We have him on he runs a helpline for us, so please make use of that via his number. But obviously, he can speak to you about whether this is something which could be realised for your club. If the answer is yes, you can either do it yourself, and that's fair. If you've got somebody within your club with the skills and the experience to do that, that's great. Russell can also take this on for you if necessary, and he works on a no-win, no-fee basis, and obviously we'll agree that with you as and when. So please, 50 clubs. Russell's telling me if you've got a bar facility, you could do this. There's potential for a lot more clubs to take advantage of this, which will possibly give you a windfall in terms of cash incentive, but also will provide some benefit moving forward as well. And just the final couple of slides, and so I think we may end up finishing a little bit early, which is good. Again, just to highlight some of the other support that we have available. There is a range of resources that are on our website, certainly around the issue around coronavirus. That deals with both the on-field, which I appreciate is right back to stage A at the moment, but also the off-field, which is where we're concentrating on this evening. So please make use of that. And we've got a load of frequently asked questions, and we've got access to the RFU Club Support Centre. What I would say is just to say that, these links are either being made available for you in the chat function, but we will follow up with these afterwards, so you've got all these dedicated links and details moving forward. Please keep sharing stuff in the chat function. Firstly, my thanks for all of you for all that you do for the game and for giving up your time this evening. I'd like to thank my panelists, Ted Mitchell and Don Parsons, and especially Alex, who's put this all together for us. Hopefully we shall see you on another webinar soon. But hopefully, there's out of the 4 options this evening, there's something which could that your clubs can take advantage of and help you get you through this initial issues that the pandemic is raising at the moment. And hopefully, the new year will bring in a fresh impetus for us all. Thank you.